Before the war between Ukraine and Russia began, there was much negotiation. In your opinion, could it have been avoided?
This war could have been avoided. It was avoidable. Let me go back. But Ukraine is basically a part of the old Soviet Union. Russians think of Ukraine like we here will think of candy. And the breakaway took place. At that time, a fair number of the old Soviet nuclear missiles were in Ukraine. The US asked Ukraine to give it up, and in return they got a guarantee of their sovereignty. Russia also joined that. That was called, I think it was done in Berlin, the Berlin Agreement. Thereafter there were problems between Russia and Ukraine, especially because NATO wanted to bring in missiles. And that's basically a part of the Russian old Soviet Union territory, which they should not have done. This went on for some time. Then there's the famous case of Russians taking over Crimea, which originally belonged to them, and they get it to Donbass and other areas. Let's leave that aside. So when it came, it was a question of, are you going to put missiles here, join the NATO and put missiles here? Russians said no. Now President Obama and President Biden, President Trump got through it. They didn't concede the Russian claims. On the other hand, they didn't make Ukraine an issue. So there was room for negotiations to settle it later. Especially President Trump at one time even reached out and had a good rapport with President Putin. And now after President Biden came in, his foreign policy seems to be to take on both Russia and China. He wants to be the defender of the Western order. Recently Russia and China signed an agreement which is called the No Limit Friendship. It's a friendship without limits and without any boundaries or prohibitions. So thereafter, when Russia was emboldened by it to push further and ask that nuclear missiles not be put there in Ukraine, and Ukraine should not become a member of NATO. US and UK, especially though not the other NATO members, try to play their own game. They try to corner Russia and make Russia back down by Ukraine saying, no, we are going in to join, we want the NATO, we are not giving in to your demands. So they played this game and they expected Putin to climb down. But Putin was ready, or he thought he was ready, and he's invaded Ukraine. So the real issue is really about the security of Russia and what are they going to do. So this has caught the West and the Americans by surprise. The fighting is going on. Russians have intervened as Soviet Union in East Germany, in Poland, in Hungary, when Hungary withdrew from NATO and from the tried to join the NATO, and then Czechoslovakia in 1968. So they have the experience. What is happening there? I think the Russians have got in there, and what will happen to Kyiv? I don't know, the last occasion was in 1941 when the Battle of Kyiv took place, and what the Germans did was they surrounded Kyiv. They never took it over. So Russians may be trying to do this, and they are putting their strength. They seem to be surrounding cities. How much they come into the center of the cities, I don't know, but there seems to be some strategy they are following. So this is what the war is. It could have been avoided, but it was not, because I think America tried to test its strength, and Putin is now responding to it with his strength. Fact is, America is more powerful, but Putin has the second largest nuclear arsenal in the world, and the danger lies there.
Now that the sanctions have been in place with the US and the West, do you think that the war from Russia's side would stop?
I don't think. The sanctions was the only remedy that the West could use, because when they were caught with the Russian invasion, what could they do? They were not prepared to fight. They were not going to fight. Europe was not going to fight. America was not. Their mood is not for a fight. So only issue that President Biden had was sanctions. They were talking of sanctions. They've gone beyond the normal sanctions, bringing in SWIFT and others. So they are now trying to use the sanctions on Russia in the hope that Russian president will be brought down by the Russian people. That will turn bad for them. Putin will lose his position. But there's another side of politics to it, because for instance, Boris Johnson was about to lose his position as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Now he is upping it so that he will go up in the polls. He already has climbed about 6 or 7%, and he is taking a tough line. For President Biden also, he is in a problematic area, because President Trump says, there was no war in my time, I knew how to deal with Putin and how to handle Ukraine. You couldn't do it. So now he has to show that he is going to bring results, and he must bring results quickly, because he is going to lose the midterm elections. So he is pressing hard on the sanctions, thinking Russia will come down and he can save himself. But basically a lot of the American issues will be domestic issues, and the Republicans won't be unhappy if the Russians stay on in Ukraine for a bit longer, because then they can get the advantage of it. The third man with elections is President Macron of France, but he is playing a different role. He is showing that he can talk to Russia, he can talk to the West, he can talk to China, and telling the Frenchmen, if you remove me, you won't have a leader recognized globally. So he is playing a different game to the other two. And now the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, he is also having elections. He is also upping his stakes to show that he can be tough on China. But all this means that we are going forward, we don't know where this will end. Each one is playing for his politics. And secondly, this is going to bring down the total global economy. And the question with the SWIFT and all should be utilized for political purposes are coming up. So anyway, it's going to be a hit on the Western economy also. And whether some of the economies can recover, where the COVID recovery will get put back by it, is another issue. So sanctions itself is becoming more complicated. And the issue for us is why are countries which are not involved in this also can't do transactions with Russia. That's a big issue for countries who are not involved. So all that is coming up now. It may be the sanctions may also lead to the question of how West is using its economic power, and how do you respond to it. Already other countries are raising this issue.
Why has China and India refused to support sanctions against Russia?
No, China has the no limit friendship with Russia, and they say that there are reasons why the Russians acted. They are not defending it, and that we should stop the fighting. India also, remember, India is very close to Russia, so is China, and they are members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization together with Pakistan, Iran and the Central Asian republics. So Russia is getting support, is getting help from there, in the sense they are not turning against. So actually what has happened is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is holding. The issue is for the Quad. India is a member, but India has not taken the same line as US. India's self-interest is that they should go along here. But there is a bigger issue than just India or China. The fact is that Asia is silent. They haven't condemned Russia the way America expected them to. They have raised the issue of the invasion in the Security Council. China, India, UAE, all are silent. They were non-committal. Indonesia, the leader of the chairman of the G20, is non-committal. It's where Pakistan is also going along with Russia. So it looks as if the whole of Asia, most of them, are going along with Russia. Now that is what is important, because Asia counts today, and everyone is neglecting that. They don't want to report it. There is another issue that has come up, and I think which we in Asia have to think of. The third conflict in Europe. Where will it end? The first was World War I. They could not sort out how to do the investigation on the assassination of the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and as a result, the First World War broke out. Serbia and Russia on one side, Germany and Austria, then France and Britain got in. They couldn't control it. The Second World War also started in Europe, and by 1940 apparently the Germans controlled the whole of Europe and Britain was actually isolated. Britain could not have survived till 1942 when Russia and America were attacked and came into the war without the help of the Asians. We gave about, South Asia alone gave about 2.5 million soldiers, and a lot of the other resources came from Asia and Africa together with Australia and Canada. But without this, Britain could not have survived without its empire. And when the war was on, remember that China, about 5 million Chinese between the nationalists and the communists, tied down the Japanese. So that the land war was basically 5 million tying down the Japanese in the Asian continent, and then the British 14th Army with the Indians tying it down in Burma. So American soldiers could go up. The US destroyed the Japanese navy. So without it, the war could not have been won. The French lost their territory. They started a government in exile, Free French. They only had a building in London. Then they asked all the French colonies to support the Free French. All the Frenchmen who were governors said no. There was one African governor, Felix Eboy of Chad. He declared for France, Free France, and that's how the French came up. Whole of Europe was under the Germans. It's we here who gave the manpower to get Europe liberated. And okay, the Europeans and Americans, Russians put the next world order. That collapsed in 89, but nevertheless the West and Russia has been running this. Now we find is that they are bungling and they are going for a third conflict. If it's not a world war, at the moment nuclear weapons are not being used, certainly there will be economic havoc, which means the Europe is unable, within a century they are unable to control their conflicts and they are trying to come out. So in this case now Asia has come up. So many of us in Asia feel that it's the time Asia stepped up and said this is not anymore your issue. This is our issue. We don't want to go to war. We are not allowing the West to run it the way they want to. We all have to get involved. And the Asia staying silent is a message, because now the African Union has also not taken part. Though Brazil and Argentina supported US, the Mexicans have stayed out. I don't think it's about the Russians, what we do, because everyone has accepted the fact that Russians have invaded Ukraine. We know they have a reason, they had a problem, they have invaded Ukraine, but the problem there is not that. If you ask everyone, they say Russians have invaded Ukraine. The problem is they don't approve of what the West is doing. So everyone is staying silent. The Asians are saying, look, we are the most powerful countries now, economies are growing. We can't get affected by this. We can't have a world war. We have our disputes, but we haven't gone to this extent. So what's happened? Look at China and India had some problems on Himalaya, but if somehow they were able to sort it out. But here, on this main issue, they want to start a world war to win their elections. And therefore, the Asian view is, look, we can't allow the West only to decide the rules of the world. That Asia must come in, and that is what I think the view I have and many others have. There are no need to get involved. I think the government of Sri Lanka has also been non-committal like all the others, Bangladesh, everyone. Some of them who have commented and not said who has invaded whom. They said the invasions are bad and the war must stop. So this has been, this is what the media is not highlighting, because the West can't accept the fact that Asia today is also calling the shots.
Sri Lanka is heavily reliant on Russia and Ukraine with regards to high exports in tea and tourism. How would this war affect our economy?
Well, we get affected, though it's not as big as our exports elsewhere, especially tea. I think the low country and some of the mid-grown go to Russia and Ukraine. We can't send it there. So that means a lot of families, low-grown families and mid-grown, smallholders are going to be having a problem. So will the factory holders. That's the big one. Secondly, is that they will have a big impact on the global economy. So we still don't know how it will work, because the Western economies will also get affected. Inflation will be high there. So it's not only a Sri Lankan issue. There's a specific Sri Lankan issue. There's another issue here.
How can our economy be not affected by what's
Everyone
happening in
will
the
be
world?
affected by this. It's how we go out. But there are a lot of potential now for Asia to think on its own. The firstly is that no one wants the SWIFT and others to be used as a political weapon. If US or UK wants to put sanctions against Russia, that's their business. But we should not be stopped from trading with Russia and others. It's a globalized economy in which we agreed that they should run the system. Now, if they are going to use it for political purposes where we lose, then I think Asia has to look at another system. China is starting a China-centric one. Some of the others may not want to have a China-centric one, but they may want to have one that is acceptable to all. I think even Africa will join it, and that's where the power is. So the West is losing that hold it had. Even the globalization they are put together, now they are taking it apart. So the West controlling these instruments of globalization and finance. If you look at the other side, now Dubai can develop because Dubai has not, UAE hasn't got involved in it. Dubai is international financial center, already people are talking Dubai is safer, it doesn't play any politics at all. Now if you look at London as a financial center, many of our business, others all send their money, and from London they used to deal with Russia or any other country. Now when London stops all those transactions, London will lose out as a financial center. They've already lost out once on Brexit, and most probably they will lose some more, and Dubai will really develop. I feel that we have to look at alternate systems. Within 10 years, Asia is capable of putting it into order. So this is a big risk that the Americans hadn't thought of, that their Western dominance of the instruments of globalization, especially look at the IT and all, are no longer relevant. Then if you look at the Western media, what they are saying is not been accepted in Asia. It's Al Jazeera who's there. Some look at here we look at the Indian TVs. So that's you can see the Western power is being reduced. I in my view, I think it's ideal time when this confrontation comes to an end for Indonesia, as was both the chairman of the G20, but also where the first Asian conference was held, for Indonesia together with China, India and UAE to summon a conference of all Asian nations and look at how we can reinvent India. After all, the Asian power started in Indonesia with the Bandung conference. So I think they should take the lead in calling for such a conference.
Thank you, Mr. Ranil, for your point of view.
Thank you for asking the questions.